Welcome back to the Logic Exchange, where we break down the strategies, signals, and shifts shaping the future of mass tort marketing. Today's conversation, Mass Tort Marketing, the Next Frontier, dives into how data, media, and performance strategy are converging to redefine how law firms source and scale high quality claimants in an increasingly competitive landscape. Joining us is Holden Berlin, co-founder of Transport Marketing. Holden brings more than 2 decades of experience at the intersection of media, marketing, and innovation, with leadership roles spanning HBO, Condé Nast, NBC Sports, Defy Media, and McClatchy. Throughout his career, he's built and scaled high-growth marketing and content operations from early-stage startups to 100 million plus enterprises, consistently unlocking new levels of performance through smart strategy and execution. At Transport Marketing, Holden partners with law firms to deliver high-quality claimants using data-driven cross-platform campaigns, bringing a level of sophistication to mass tort marketing that mirrors what we've seen in the evolution of consumer brands. His track record speaks for itself, from being the first marketer to stream the Super Bowl live, to creating the #1 comedy event on YouTube for Smosh and Five Gum, to launching Pringit 4-wheel drive, one of the most successful feel-good social platforms ever built. Along the way, he's worked with iconic brands like Coca-Cola, Kellogg's, General Motors, and Verizon to turn creative ideas into scalable revenue-generating engines. This is a conversation where mass tort marketing is going and what it takes to stay ahead of it. Let's jump right in. Holden, welcome.
Thank you, Nick. Appreciate you having me and looking forward to today's conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. I know you just got back from Harris Martin. How was that?
It was great. It's always good when you hear the thought leaders, in the space kind of talking about what's new and also a lot of developments. And there were a lot. In the last, I feel like 3-4 days have been really active and good news for a lot of the cases that we're working on, including
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, while you were there, I'm sure you saw the social media addiction verdicts in California and New Mexico. I know my phone has been
yes,
blowing up since then.
for sure.
It's been a very interesting week.
Definitely has. And it's look that we've needed some good movement. I
Yep.
think there's been some lumps in recent weeks. So we're
Mhm.
happy that there's some good news to be had there for sure.
Absolutely, man. Couldn't agree with you more. And obviously, this is a signal to the market that nobody's untouchable, right? I don't care if you're Google, YouTube, Meta. Nobody's untouchable in this, and I for one loved it. So
Absolutely.
cool, man. Awesome. Well, let's jump in real quick. My name's Nick Thompson. I'm the host of the Logic Exchange, also the CRO here at Email Agency. Um, we try to put together this podcast in an informative way that hopefully #1 doesn't put people to sleep, but then also #2, it just kind of talks about the trends and maybe some of the do's and don'ts and that sort of thing. So we'll jump right into kind of that first section, which is partner strategy and evaluation, something that you and I do on a daily basis, right? When we're talking with potential partners, from law firms all the way to like third party verification. So
Absolutely.
how do you vet and choose your partners in this space?
And I'm glad you said the word partners, because I
Yep.
think that's the most important distinction.
Yep.
We hear it a lot, and I think it's one of the most frustrating terms that's used is vendors. How to use your vendors, and it has such a transactional, derogatory
I
term to it.
agree. Yep.
And for success in this business, the way that it's how we evaluate it is like, are you bringing a value to our company, right? And every single law firm or marketer like us needs to have partners in place that kind of help them achieve their goals.
Yep.
You're not good at everything, right? You have holes, you have things that aren't your core strengths. And for us, it's how do we fill those needs with the partners and people that have like-minded visions like us. I think the last 4 years have been filled with a lot of people jumping into this space as opportunities have arisen. Camp Lejeune was one of those.
Yep.
And it was a big cash grab, right? And people came in and said, hey, this is a big sector. Let me try to figure out how I can make money real quick off this. Not how do I build a long term growth strategy and build partnerships that are going to last, 10, 15, 20 plus years. And that's what we've always founded ourselves on is how do we continue to grow with somebody? And everyone as a company is going to face challenges, right? You're going to face headwinds that you weren't expecting. You need partners to help you kind of withstand that and then grow and adapt and kind of go beyond that and kind of found the future for what your company looks like. That is
Yep.
our
No,
evaluation process.
I completely agree with you, man. And to kind of jump on the Camp Lejeune bandwagon, if you will, it was kind of a perfect storm, right? We were coming out of COVID. There wasn't a lot of funds being moved in the space, and all of a sudden, Camp Lejeune comes out of the woodwork, and everybody gets really excited, including some bad actors, right? And they
Mhm.
flooded the space. And I think that we've all worked really hard to clean up some of that. It's not all the way there, but I think it's a lot better.
For
As you
sure.
know, I sit on the board for the NLVA and head up the compliance committee, and that's one of the things that we talk about all the time. Like how do we how do we not get tort reform? Right? Nobody wants that, and
Nobody.
so I think that your evaluation of potential partners is a great roadmap to doing that because you have to work with not only people that you like, right? I want to work with everybody that I like, but sometimes you just have to work with people that you trust, that
That you
know
trust.
that you know that they're going to do a good job. So um, that kind of leads us right into the next part, which what separates a basic vendor relationship from a true strategic partnership in this space.
Yeah, but I think it comes down to if you are looking at things transactionally, I have something that you might need, and I'm in a position where I need that offloaded. I don't care about anything else other than, hey, I'm gonna give you X leads or some technology that might help benefit you in the next, you know, 30 days, 60 days. And then after that, I don't really care. I'm moving on to the next thing. Like
Yeah.
those are the people that we try to avoid.
Yep.
Right. And I think you no different than as a friendship in life, right? When you have a foundational friendship and stuff gets pretty real quick, right?
Hmm.
Death of a loved one,
Hmm.
problems with your children, right? Things that are real life issues. It's those friends that either stick by you or choose not to be around, right? And I think the partnerships that you choose are not very dissimilar to that, right? In that you're going to deal with stuff, right? You're going to have a law firm that you're going to deal with who's going to be unreasonable about their expectations, or something's going to arise out of innocence, and then it's going to come down as like, do you stand behind that product or service that you're offering? And we've seen that from a lot where things have kind of fallen apart and then people just disappear, right? They don't stand by what they do. They don't value that and say, hey, I know it's an uncomfortable conversation, but I'm going to sit here and I'm going to tackle it with you and try to figure out how do we get to the bottom of it, right? And how do we fix it? Those are the people that we stick with. Those are the people that you can trust, right? The people that are just like throw their hands in the air, say, "Sorry, I don't know what to tell you," And we've seen that a lot. We've been dealt with a lot of platforms that have come into our space, right? They've extended out, and those are partners we look at as like that could be a really good lead platform for us or CRM, and it doesn't work, right? Or they're
Right.
bugged, and we end up paying for leads that we should never have paid for because there was a bug in the software, right? It's like how you handle those situations. To me, stuff happens. Nobody's perfect. Everybody's going to have problems. It just is the nature of life, but it's managing that and trying to find that equity and understanding. And you would see that back in, I'm going back a few years, but phone calls were a big part of what we did, right? Driving a lot of inbounds, but
Yep.
also verified transfers. And what you'd find out is like, hey, if there's an issue, I'll deal with it. And it's not that, right? If there's an issue, it's a much bigger issue than just I'll deal with it, right? You got to understand the levels of security and things that we have to put in place before we trust in those processes. So that's kind of like people that are transparent that'll open up their business so we understand everything that's going on. That's helpful for us. And people that'll work with us to make sure that our level of comfort is met. Our law firms, right? Their level of comfort is met because that is ultimately who we're reflecting in a lot of these campaigns and work that we do. It's the people that we represent as clients.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And going to go back to 2 points that you made on the phone calls. You need to understand why this is a problem, right? And so like thought leaders in the space understand that. The ones that don't understand why this is an issue, those are the ones that you see getting lapped in this. And in this arena that we find ourselves in, compliance is everything. And you have to have good, clean data at the top end of your funnel so that when you get to a signed potential claimant, you know that data is clean and you can stand behind it. And then one other thing that you said at the very beginning, everybody's dealing with something. I distinctly remember sitting at a dinner with you and Zach and a bunch of our other friends last NTL, and I had just found out that morning that my father-in-law had passed away, and the level of camaraderie and brotherhood that was shown to me throughout that by yourself, by Zach, by Michael Orrell, by everybody that was in that room, Scott Blackburn, was amazing, and it made a very difficult situation that much better. And so I don't even know if I ever said this, but thank you. That was very much appreciated. It was needed, and that was a very difficult time, but it takes a village, and we all, everybody was there for me at that time, and I really appreciate that.
It does, absolutely, and that is partnership, right?
Yep.
It's that, if regardless, if even if you're not working together with somebody at that time, like you have that level of like, hey, I can share this with them because I trust them, right?
Yep.
And I trust the reaction I get, and I would expect nothing. I'd expect exactly the same from you, should I unfortunately be in some situation like that. So
Absolutely, man. Absolutely, you got it. Just a phone call away. So let's transition into the next part of this, which is kind of lessons learned. We've all learned them, right?
mhm.
Sometimes the hard way, right? But what are the biggest do's and don'ts that you've learned in marketing, and not just necessarily mass tort marketing or legal lead gen marketing, but what's the biggest lesson that you've learned in marketing over the years that you could share with everybody?
Yeah, I think I'll give you the top ones because it's kind of the foundation of the founding our company, right? It's, I started, and thank you for that wonderful intro of like my background. But as you can see, I've worked with a lot of big brands and,
Yep.
$100 million plus campaigns, delivering those in even 17 days of the Olympics, right? And be able to do that, it's a lot of trust, right? Because I can go out as a marketer and throw a high level concept out, which is no different than us now having a conversation with a law firm, right? And it's like, this is new, we haven't done it, but here's the idea, what we're going to
Hmm.
do. It's another thing to be able to execute it. So what I learned very early on is I'd have a conversation with the CMO or CEO of one of these major corporations, McDonald's, General Motors, and then
Hmm.
I would walk out of that meeting, the layer cake down to the people that are actually doing the campaigns. It was 15, 17 people deep, and they weren't in that room, and they weren't being communicated what was promised in the dialogue of how we're going to do the strategy. So what you saw was then the evolution of that with agencies and just internal departments. It was not what you originally set out to do, right? And sometimes you could kind of get yourself involved in the mix, or it was very complex where you had to be involved. But that's why when Zach and I created the company, it was to get rid of that layer cake, right? It was for us, hey, if I'm going to be selling you on an idea and a concept and a strategy, I'm going to be the one that's actually doing it. And I think that's a little bit of the difference of what transport does in the space is Zach and I build the strategy, but we're also the ones with our hands on the keyboard. I go into Meta every day. I'm building campaigns, right? And some people might view that as like, that's probably not the most efficient use for a co-founder's time. But to me, it's everything because it tells me what works and what doesn't work. And then I know exactly in terms of launching these platforms where there's opportunity and where there's risk so that I can go in and have an honest conversation with a firm, which leads to challenge number two, which is like making sure we both have the same expectations, right?
Yep.
And it goes back to when we talked about partnership. And there's new campaigns that we've launched. We've never run them. We have no idea how these are going to do,
Yep.
right? And the spirit of partnership with the firm is understanding is like, hey, we need to have some flexibility that we're going to somehow make money from it, and you guys are going to get what you need. But it has to be fluid in that way that it works out for both people. That's what a partnership is. A
Agreed.
partnership isn't let me get somebody, because there are law firms, and as well as I do, people that are out there who want volume. They're going to make you sign up to a campaign that they know you're going to lose. They hope you won't, right? That you're going to win, but you're set up to fail. And those are the campaigns and the partners that we avoid, right? We want people
Yep.
that have that same aligned interest with us. That's something I've learned. You've got to be able to say no to
Yep.
people that have large budgets and want to spend a lot because it's just not worth the relationship and that conversation that you're going to be at, which is you're going to be up against it and you're not going to be able to find your way there. We see that sometimes in it could be pricing model, right? Where the price is so low for something that's like, how is it even possible that somebody could generate that at that amount? And that's why being in the platform, running the media that we run, that I'm in, I can tell you definitively, yeah, I can probably cut my margins a little bit in terms of the cost per lead, but to be able to do it by 100%, there's just no way.
Right.
There's no way.
Yeah, I agree
Right?
with you, man. It's funny how often things come across my desk where I have that like, oh, this is a trap. Like and listen, we've all been blinded by that big blank check, right?
Absolutely.
And you sign up to do this campaign, and you're like, you do it with the best of intentions, and then you realize really quickly, oh crap, this isn't going to work. The unit economics just don't make any sense. And then you have to kind of lean back into that partnership and be like, hey, I know I said yes to this, but out of respect for you, I can't do this. Let me send you back your money, right? And then
Absolutely.
oftentimes in that, that's respected, and they come back,
Right.
well, what can you do, right? Instead of
Yeah.
instead of pretending and pretending and pretending until you've completely lost the bag. You go back and have that honest expectation conversation with, hey, I know I said that I was going to try this. It's not going to work, and oftentimes they're like, all right, cool, what is going to work? So I love that.
Yeah.
For me, the biggest do and don't, what was literally what you said, is set the proper expectations. At the beginning, um, everybody over promises and under delivers, at least
Mhm.
at some point in their career. And I know I've been guilty of that in the past. And so now I try to under promise and over deliver, because they always remember that big number, right? Everybody always remembers that.
They
Yeah,
do.
no, they could do 100 a week. Well, no, if the reality is 50 a week, well then, hey, you know what? I actually think I could do like 40 to 50 a week, right? And then you're setting a proper expectation. So cool, man. Awesome.
I get it. Yeah.
Last question in this one. Uh, how do you balance volume versus that verification process, like third party verification, as you're scaling a campaign?
Yeah, I think it's the trickiest part. And I think, for us, it's assuming the full burden of risk is not really kind of the best campaign to take on, right? Where
Yep.
you've got to hit a volume number while maintaining quality,
Hmm.
while, right? Because you don't, what you can do as a marketer, right, is what you can do as a marketer. You can't control somebody coming in that may not have what they say they have. For true marketing, right? You're running social, you're running email, you're running print, you're running TV, you're running radio, right? They're responding to any other advertisement like any other person. There's no verification in that, right? So the things that we can do and we try to do is make it tougher on our funnel, right? So add questions in, make sure that you try to check enough boxes where it's not an easy intake. Because if you have the same intake and it's a simple intake and they've filled out that form 5 or 6 times, right? Now you're going to have a higher media cost, and that's going to have a higher fallout. And what you're going to see is you think you're doing well and you've signed 5 cases so far. Those 5 may be bad cases when
Yep.
the verification comes in. So it's managing that scale and trying to find the most optimal test that you can run to keep your media costs down, and then be able to try to verify, does that channel work? Because oftentimes we'll see an entire channel doesn't work. It's not just, hey, this campaign or this creative doesn't work, but the channel doesn't work
Yep.
because any other reason is like, what is their exposure? How much have they been exposed to that campaign already? We see that in stuff that's been around for a long time, right? Talcum powder, campaigns like that, or hair relaxer, where it's like you're going to run it on some channels and it's just not going to produce the audience that you want, right?
Absolutely.
Let alone the verification that might come behind that is like, do they actually have what they say they had? So
Yeah. Does it live up to what they said? Yeah. And absolutely, man. We've all run that. Like, you're not going to want to run a World Trade Center campaign on, I don't know, Snapchat, right? Like, it's just not going to work, or
it's
on
exactly,
TikTok.
exactly.
Yep. So
And
totally get
yeah.
that.
And I think to that point also with verification, right? I think it comes down to like once you start to understand what is being coming back in verification, like optimizing that is way easier. So then you start to get a sense of like, okay, now I have a little honey hole here. How do I keep that going? How do I expand that? And that's where we'll shift audiences. We do a lot of that with lookalike profiles that we'll build and we'll deploy against other channels. So
Yep.
once you build up enough of a base of an audience that's basically, if you proven, if you will, it helps you to kind of filter out a lot of the noise that you would generally get. That's why trying to jump out of the gate with 100 or 200 or 300 cases, like we try not to do that at this point,
Yep.
especially if
I
we
agree.
haven't run. Stuff that we have run, it's much easier because we already have that down. We understand it's been proven out. We've gotten that feedback from the firm. We kind of know what works and what doesn't work. But something that's brand new, we don't know. So you're starting to run it. It's like, I'd rather run 20, 30, and then sit back and say, hey, how's that look? What's that proven out? Give it a couple weeks, kind of see how it's yielding, and then move on from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I love predictability in this, and to your point, with a campaign that you've been running for a while, it is predictable. You know what you're looking at. On a new campaign, it sounds silly, but you don't know what you don't know. And so I'm a huge fan of crawl, walk, run. Let's swing small, let's miss small, and then if it makes sense and it's backing out for both of us, cool. Let's start to scale. But one of my colleagues says it all the time. Not everybody is willing to do a nosedive or a swan dive into a new campaign, and I tend to agree with that. I love the testing phase. Let's optimize, and then let's go to work, right?
Absolutely.
Uh, so cool, man. Well, that's actually a great segue into kind of defining success. When do you know a campaign is truly working? Like, what specific metrics tell you that it's real growth versus just a temporary lift?
Outside of the reorder, of course. No,
Of
but
course, yeah. That's
you know,
number one. Number one.
that's number one. Like, all right, they like it enough.
Yeah.
But I do think like the KPIs that we kind of look at and that success metric is like you're having good conversation about what's coming across, right?
Yep.
Where you don't get any feedback, sometimes it's like, I don't know, right? Great, you're accepting the cases, but is the quality there? Are you having the conversations? The ones, and it sounds strange, but the ones where it comes back and you're kind of digging into the conversation that was had, that tells me that these are really quality, right? Because at that point, when you're picking at the little things within an individual intake, you like what you're getting, but
And
you
you
may
want,
not like a specific one or
yeah,
two.
You want more. You want more of A, not the
Yeah.
right. So yeah,
And you know
totally.
what you
I
want.
agree.
So you've now hit a rhythm with the firm in that standpoint of like, okay, we kind of, then you're going to align on that and say, look, and I think I view success as like when you change criteria together and you have that conversation of what that's going to do, and maybe that does change the price point or maybe it does change volume, but you guys come together and say, hey, I get it, right? We agree with you. And I'll give you the perfect example of that is running campaigns like Roblox or social media harm
Mhm.
or video game addiction. And you start to see cases that come in, it might be 3 or 4, and you're like, logic would dictate that a 3-year-old or 4-year-old isn't doing these things. Now, some might because parents would use a device or as a babysitter, but still putting it in their perspective, like that's not a really solid, case for them. So what we try to do in that case is like, look, you didn't ask for it, but we're going to put a cutoff of age 7. Anything under that, we'll just dismiss that, right? But those are the ways we put things in. It's like that's a good way of performance when you can kind of agree on these things and solve the problem that they're looking for. At the same time, you're doing that in how you market, right?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I love that, and I love that you said the age 7. We do the same thing as well, and we figure that that's when the vast majority of these children can begin to read. If you can't read, how are you responding to a chat, right? And it seems like
Exactly.
it's common sense, but there's a lot of people that are like, oh well, whatever, we signed it, right? Like, no, it's not meeting the criteria, right? So
Agreed.
I love that. What's one underrated KPI that you wish more firms tracked?
I think it is because things that you can't necessarily control, but stuff that you can control, which I like, is where does this prove out? 6 months, 12 months, right? You don't ever
Mhm.
hear that. Like, did these cases stick? Have you been in contact with them? You get that initial contact, right? Of
Mhm.
like, by 14 days, did you get a hold of them or 30 days? Right. But beyond that, I wish you would be able to get that because I think that's a point where you look at it as like, it's not just did they have what they say they had? Did they, right? Was everything aligned? But are they sticking through with it? Right?
Yep.
Are these people that are, which is the most important part, is like if you've 6 months, 12 months, because as you know, a lot of these litigations take a lot of time.
A long time. Yep.
And you have no idea of where down the road these stick. So that would be something that, I know it's not necessarily needs to be shared, but it would be helpful from a marketer's perspective if you had that KPI, right? What was your stick rate?
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe at a 6 month, 12 month, 18 month, right? Because some of these, like talc, going on for like 40 years, right? And so
A long time.
it would be really nice to kind of have that. I think that is one KPI that I want to write down, because I always ask, but I want to start leaning into it and be like, you know what, I need, if you could, Mr. Partner, give me a stick rate at 6 months, give me a stick rate at 12 months. And what that is also is doing is it's a subtle, it's just a subtle nod to, we're still going to be doing business together in 6 months,
Absolutely.
12 months, 18 months. It's that presumptive close. So I like that as well. I appreciate
Yeah.
that. Thanks,
And
Holden.
look, the other, for sure. And the other side of that is, in order to get those benchmarks, it then helps you to solve a problem for them, right? Which is like, look, I don't know what you're doing from your CRM. What are your messages that you're sending out? But like, if we can help you along the way, happy to build creative, drop, e-blast, whatever it is that you need us to do and help, happy to do that stuff. So that's kind of
Absolutely.
that save program that you could kind of put in place for them to help that metric go up.
Absolutely. And it just makes you more sticky, right? Like
For sure.
we're partnering in this, and we're sticking together, right? We're
That's right.
not this isn't a commodity. Um, cool.
Absolutely.
Well, let's shift gears just a little bit. Obviously, AI has dominated the landscape in
Yes.
the tech world for the last couple of years. So we're going to talk a little bit about innovation and evolution in the business of law. What's a marketing innovation or channel that you're watching closely this year?
Yeah, I mean, I know AI is very big and it's important, and everybody's talking about that.
Mhm.
I look at that as like, yeah, that'll be involved in our daily lives for the perpetual future, right? It just is. But the things that I think are the most interesting, and we've kind of played around a lot in that space in the last year, is just how other channels like influencers, right? Take platforms like Reddit, right, where it's content and recommendations, your news breaks and next
Mhm.
doors, more localized content. How does that begin to play out in this space? It's always been a persistent. Every attorney in every market has billboards. They have bus ads. They're sponsoring the Major League Baseball team and NFL team. But how does it work in terms of really this hyper localized space? And it's interesting because the traditional thought was always, hey, Nick, you live in Tennessee, right? You have a problem. You're going to want to find an attorney that lives in your neighborhood, and that's your
Yep.
person, right? And
Yep.
the
Yep.
reality is, in so much of what's happening these days, that's not what it is. That might not be the best representation for you. So how do you kind of use that same platform but extend that out? And that's, I think, where people that will solve that innovation and use that as a tool, it's going to be very important, right? Because it's going beyond what we see is a lot of platforms are now, the good and bad of like some of the verdicts that are happening is like it's going to change how these platforms operate, right? And it's going to stop
Yep.
being as effective as it is. So it's not going to give you the same capabilities. There's going to be guardrails that are put in place, right, to avoid future litigations. And that's going to change how we as marketers are going to have to behave. So it's finding new ways to reach audiences and be in there where people aren't necessarily exposed.
Yep.
AI is very tricky in terms of how do you use it, not directly from a marketing standpoint, because we know like, and we use it a lot, right? Copy for landing pages, basis
Yep.
creative ads. There's so many platforms that create video now that takes you 10 minutes versus a 2 or 3 week process and a lot of cost, right? And that's removed it. But people are now using AI instead of Google, right? They're using
Hmm.
AI platforms to help them inform their choices. What has not been figured out, which I think is the most interesting, is how are you now marketing in AI, right? How are you getting what you're doing out there? And I've already seen a lot of that, right? I've seen it come up where if you're asking questions about, it might be a new uh lawsuit that you hadn't heard of but
Yep.
was made aware, and say, hey, I've not heard that one, right? I'll take an example. When I first heard of silica dust, I was like, what is that, right? What is that campaign? And if you go into AI and you start searching AI, it's going to start pulling people that are relevant within the space, right? How do you, no different than search engine listings, how do you get into that, right? How do you make sure that you're showing up when people are asking these types of questions about a lawsuit, right? Or, hey, I have this, like, what do I do for that? Like, that's where I think it's going to get really interesting. And it's no different than when it was like, how do I get ranked higher in Google? How do I make
Yep.
sure I'm there? It's going to be like that across AI on all AI platforms.
Yeah, it's
And I
been
think that's
interesting. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no. Go ahead.
So it's kind of brought like SEO back into the fold, where that was obviously a buzzword, 15, 20 years ago, but it's kind of gone away a little bit as Meta has gained steam, and as pay per click and all of that. But in order to be ranked and pulled up in ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, pick your poison, it's kind of brought SEO back into it, and which is funny. It's like all things old are new again, and that's
That's right.
kind of the way that I look at it. Cool, man. So one more question on this side, and it has to do with one of the things that you said with AI. It's made everything a little bit faster, right? Like for copy or for emails or for whatever. Do you see a shift from like speed first? Because over the last 5-10 years, it's been how quickly can we get this done?
Yes.
Um, do you see a shift from speed first to compliance first when scaling, or is speed still king in your opinion?
I mean, the problem is we're beholden to speed,
Yeah.
right? And that idea is like sometimes it takes so long to get a campaign going and to get everything that you need to get built. But the second that last piece of deliverable, which is the funding, it hits your account, that's the point where it's like, when are we live? When are we live? What are we doing? Right. And you and I know like true marketing doesn't go that fast,
Mm-mm.
right? And especially if you're running that media, you've got to start small. You can't just jack up a giant budget, pop it out there and hope it does well. So that I think is the sort of the detriment you're up against. And that I think AI does help in a lot of ways to speed that process along. It certainly helps speed intake along, but it also creates a lot of, as you said, the translations and compliance parts. Like you have to have human eyes on this stuff,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Because it might just translate something different and be something that wasn't intended and now becomes something that you didn't even intend for non-compliance, but it's just there because AI pulled it in. And I think that part of it is like it's got to have guardrails in every way that AI is used, and it's great for that speed, and it does make that process shorter. You have to have eyes on it. You cannot lose sight of that. I think that's the
Absolutely, man.
imperfection of it.
I agree with you. I mean, I think it's a necessary tool, and one that is continuing to grow. But I don't think, at least for the foreseeable future, I don't think that it's going to replace the Jims and the Jills, right? You still have to have
Agreed.
that. Will it make their life a little bit easier on the front end? I think so, right? But at the end of the day, there is still the human element in this, because you're dealing with humans at the
Absolutely.
end of the
And
day.
and it's humans, but it's also in the most trying, complex things that are going on in their lives,
Yep.
right? So I'll liken it to, and this is the past week for me. It was I had an issue with just an auto payment, and it was like they didn't go through, right? And then you're calling customer service, and you're going through the AI experience, right? You don't check the boxes of the numbers that are coming up, right? Whereas like press one for this, tell me what you have. There's no way to tell somebody when it's the story is so unique, and that's with torts that you run, it is unique and each is
Yep.
individual, right? They're not just because we're marketing and law firms want to find, right? They're litigating. That doesn't mean that a consumer's journey is easy. It's a very complex story and they don't know. So that's where I think AI is never going to be 100% because like you need to have them be able to tell a story and not have it give them canned responses. And we see the companies that come through all the time talking about like, oh, the AI is, it's foolproof and it's not, right?
No.
These are humans, and you need a human
It
element.
it knows what you programmed into it, right? And then
That's right.
yes, it can learn, but at the end of the day, these things, especially with like a lot of the sex abuse campaigns that we're
Correct.
in, it's not black and white. It's not yes or no. It's a story,
That's
and
right.
you need to have somebody that's compassionate in order to ingest that story and then hopefully be able to help that individual. And I don't see AI doing that, at least yet,
At least
right?
yet. At least yet.
Yeah, yeah.
Correct.
Cool. Awesome. Well, let's talk about the future of legal marketing. We just got a couple of sections left. How do you see the landscape evolving as regulations tighten around privacy and TCPA, like California SB 37, things like that?
Yeah, I mean, California is tricky, but I think it opens up, and just think about it from a marketing perspective. Like, if people are thinking, and people being law firms, right? If you're thinking about what is a strategic opportunity, and it's to get in front of that, because as a marketer, we tend to not touch it unless it's working with a California firm or that has co-counsel that they want to put
Yep.
in, which is, I think, is a good thing. That disclosure is good, right? Making sure that you know who you're working with, I think, is a good thing long term. The problem is when you've got an excluded entire state, which is a massive 10-15%
Yeah,
of the
13% of
overall
the entire nation. Yeah, yeah.
audience that you're
Yeah,
going to be able to reach.
yeah.
That's a big miss. So if you think about it differently as a law firm and say, hey, I have opportunity, being that I'm either in California or I have a California office or co-counsel, I think there's a huge opportunity for you to go after that segment. So I think the future hopefully becomes more opportunity in those ways where you can find these pockets. But certainly it's going to create, they're not going to be the only ones, right? And there's going to be other challenges that we're going to have to face, right? And I think what it's going to do is, and I always liken this, and this is kind of the story we're always talking to a law firm, it's going to weed people out. The people that can't control that process, the people that don't have the ability to and disclose all the things compliantly they need to, they're going to go away because business is going to be way too hard, right? They don't want to do it. When things are
Yeah.
hard, they're not going to make money. They're not going to want to do it. So
Yeah, just
I
gonna
think that
water off.
leaves
Yep.
a lot of us that fight that daily fight. We were down to the wire with 1-to-1, as you know,
Yep.
and
Yep.
that was going to change. That's not going away. It'll come back around. There'll be other versions of that. I think the future, unfortunately, we're up against a lot of these other lead categories, right? That fill all of our inboxes. I can't tell you on a daily basis how many texts and phone calls I get for small business loans or
Yep.
entities looking to acquire a company, all this spam, right? And like, that reality is, like, the companies that market that, those are the ones that are killing us, right? As independent
I
marketers. And
agree.
like, that challenge, as long as you have those people doing it in mass, it's going to shape what we do, unfortunately. And it
Yeah, no,
just,
I agree with you, man. I agree with you, and it's funny that you brought up the emails and the phone calls, texts, LinkedIn messages. It's like every single day. I know that I'm probably deleting those things and or reporting them to spam. It probably takes a good 20 minutes of my day if you
it does.
arbitrage it all the way out.
Absolutely.
And it's like I've called them back and been like, take me off your list. Like it just I'm like, if you don't, I we're going to the next step, right? And it's amazing to me that nobody in this space or really in any space wants all of this reform that can happen, but it's the bad actors that are pushing it forward. And I feel like it's like, I don't know if you watch Lord of the Rings, but when Jon Snow's standing there against the army and it's just him, like sometimes it feels that way in our space. And it's like, damn, man, when do we get a break from all of these bad actors that keep pushing these agendas that are creating problems and headaches for everybody? And
Absolutely.
I don't necessarily have the answer for it, but I'm ready for the fight, and I'm quite frankly also ready for the fight to be over.
For sure. No, no,
So
agreed. I think, by the way, one of the things, I think, when you just go on Meta as an example, right? I'm in every funnel, right? Just from being in campaigns all day, and I see everything that comes through, and you see the stuff of the non-compliance. It still goes in, right? The dancing, cash fanning videos,
yeah,
twerking, all the weird stuff. And it's still unbelievable to me because it's still running for California, and you see what's going on in LA,
yep,
and it's just wild. And I think it's wild if, like, where does that stop and how does it stop? And it's, the firms can only do so much. But this is a conversation that I had 2 days ago with another firm who's involved in that, not in a bad way, but is involved in that from a leadership perspective. And the conversation was, I got to stop working with other law firms who are bringing in these types of partners, right? And like, that's where it's got to stop, right? It's like,
yep.
at some point, it's like, if you can't trust the people you're working with, you got to stop working with those people. I don't care, right? If they're half the cost of everybody else, like, you got to understand, like, it's going to cost you in the long run. Your costs are going
Yep.
to go up, or your ability to get cases is going to be more compromised because you're allowing that stuff to happen.
Absolutely, man, and that's actually a great point that I want to dig into a little bit. So, we get beat up on price all the time, and I think at the end of the day, like, there's a bunch of us that do it the right way. You do it the right way. I think we do it the right way. But if I give you a price on something, it's not because I'm trying to like boost up my margins. It's what I really genuinely think it's going to cost, and it's also attributing in fallout, right? So
Mhm.
if somebody comes back and they're like, let's just say I'm like, oh, it's 5K, right? And they're like, well, I can get them over here for 2,500. Like, okay, great. You're going to lose 50% of them. You're going to pay the 5K that I'm trying to bill you for this and partner with you on. So do you want to pay it on the front end, or do you want to pay it on the back end? Because you're paying it no matter what. And
Yeah.
I think having those transparent conversations with folks that you ultimately trust and they trust you is the way that we all keep this thing kind of rolling down the road.
I think
Um,
it is. Yeah.
so one more thing, and then we'll jump into just a little bit of Holden philosophy. What does the future of mass tort claim and acquisition look like to you?
I think I'd say the last 4 or 5 months, I think a lot of people have kind of felt the same, which is like there's another kind of shift in this. A
Mm,
lot of that just happens to be the timing and kind of what's out there, and a lot of focus is on abuse, right? So
yep,
I
big time.
think
Yep,
because, looking at like what's a truer payout in a quicker time frame and less risk. So I think there is this, look, it's repercussions from a lot of exterior money flowing into the markets the
hmm
last few years and
and those
not
bills are
being paid
due.
out. Those bills are due, and those are
Yep,
pretty big. So I think it's shifting a lot of the foundation to more evergreen stuff to help kind of
yep,
stem the tide. Things like abuse and things that are kind of more late stage, versus where we saw a few years ago. There were more there's more risk aversion and getting in early and trying new things and saying, hey, I like the science here, or I feel like it's a pretty compelling case. I think that's hopefully will come back a little bit. I think the social media stuff we saw recently opens up
yep,
hopefully some new life in terms of people that were previously untouchable. um, I think the challenge is still going to be there in terms of, what is true, or how do we make sure there's less fallout. It's a way more, which is probably the right model for law firms, which is like, how do I, hedge my risk? Um, and I think we're beholden to that as well, and trying to find ways that we can help them to do that, within good reason. I say within good reason because I may share a different philosophy, but like, we don't want to get into medical records. That's not what we do. I'm not in that space. Us trying to get into that space is not something we want to do. Right? It
right.
creates its own risk for us in terms of, compliance and stuff that I don't know legally, um, where you kind of fit in that process with some of these claimants and with the firm. So for us, I think it becomes like, how do we, outside of that, find ways that we can partner together with firms to help them mitigate that risk, but also help ourselves mitigate risk. Right? It
Yep.
can't just be I'm shifting the burden of risk from the firm and these people to the marketer and these same people, right?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely. Like, how do we share this, right? Like, how do we share this? How do we work together? Third party verification. To some, it's a bad word. To me, not really, right? Like, it keeps us not honest. We're already honest, but it gives our partners just that little bit more security. And okay, cool. I really like what I'm getting from them, and so does this other place, right? Like,
that's
so
right.
I thoroughly like that,
And
and
having a
it
model
makes
is
it
like,
easy.
yeah, if you have a model where, there's like, I've got at least a percentage of verified cases where it's like, 60, 70% of these all in face value are good, then you feel pretty good about it, right? And you're
Yep.
maintaining a price that you feel good about. It's not an inflated price that's, for only verified records, but it's stuff that you've said, hey, it's gone through a third party. They feel pretty strong that you're getting a good docket against this, and the cost is reasonable. So you could do it either way, but you don't want to do it in a way that's like, look, we're not going to pay you more, but we want to knock out that, 20, 30% off the top. Like that's not a partnership. That doesn't provide the value. It just provides
Right.
all the risk come in one way.
Absolutely. That's a risk assessment that doesn't really work out for anybody other than.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. All right, cool. Well, let's jump to the last section, which is
Yeah.
leadership and philosophy. What's the hardest part about leading a marketing team in this industry today?
I think the hardest part is not knowing day to day what's going to work, right?
Yep.
It's different than any other industry I work where it's like, yeah, usually you might have a year, 2 or 3 year trend, right? And all of a sudden you start to see that might be I'm going back, but programmatic, right? When programmatic came on the scene in terms of media, it changed the shift and kind of devalued because it was a shiny object. It devalued a lot of things, but you can account for that. What we do day to day, it's hard to account for that, right? And all of a sudden a new law gets passed, right?
Hmm.
As you saw with SB 37 or almost happened with 101. It's like that can change the entire framework of your business. And you've got to be able to adapt and do it pretty quickly. That I think from a leader perspective, ensuring that you're not overinflating your team, your cost, you got to be able to be nimble. And we've learned that you have to have people that are flexible and nimble in that way and can roll with it, right? Because like, and even in a campaign level, like what might work for you, like Depo Provera. I go back to
Hmm.
the glory days of Depo when it first started. It was plentiful and it worked well, and you saw a good volume, and then like that overnight, gone, right? And it dropped, and it became really competitive, and everybody was marketing it, and like you need to be able to adapt. So what do? You can't just fold up shop. It's what's our next course? What else haven't we tried? Right? What
Yep.
are new strategies that we can put in place? Where do we know people aren't that might be places that could yield results for us? And I think it's that day to day, week to week mentality that is very challenging, but it's also very rewarding because when you can stem the tide and figure it out and chart that path forward, it's great. And I think
Yep.
but I think that is I see it as like the biggest challenge is just that flexibility from a day to day perspective.
Absolutely, man. I completely agree with you. So we'll end with one question, and then we'll just kind of chat a little here at the end. What's one piece of advice that you'd give to firms trying to modernize their marketing and intake operation in today's landscape?
I'll give two pieces because
Oh,
one
cool.
is
Awesome. Bonus.
you get the bonus one. The first is there's so much information that they sit on that's a value for how we shape a campaign,
Mhm.
right? And a lot of times firms are unwilling to share that. And I'd rather say, look, if you're unwilling because you think we might go out and blab to the market, let's get an NDA in place, right? Because
Yeah.
that you see and I'll give you an example of like, a pressure cooker campaign. The devil's in the details of that campaign, who that audience is, the stories that they have, right? When they go through the full process, you need that data coming back, right? You need it to understand, like, hey, we might need to rechange how we're marketing these, right? That might be changing the age demo. It might be changing the geographical locations of where you're seeing this stuff. It's that way of like, oh, I never thought about that perspective of like that's who it is, and that may be um, standard for them because they're dealing with it and they're in the weeds of all of these cases. But from a marketer, we don't get that. That's one I think um, that's just it's just a critical component for what we do.
Yep.
I don't know if you see that a lot, but like I think that shaping that helps us. And when you get that information, it's everything. Um,
Absolutely. And one of the things that you'd said earlier is always my biggest ask when I start a new campaign is that feedback loop, right? Like we do sign retainers with QC and QA and smart reviews, all of it, right? We do all of it. But I want to know what happens after that, right? Like I want that feedback loop. How did that first conversation go? To your point earlier, what does it look like 6 months from delivery?
mhm.
What does it look like a year from delivery? Like let's set up if not a weekly meeting, a bi-weekly to just kind of talk about it, right? Like what are the next steps? How long do you want to run this? Are you happy? Like all of these things. And I, for the longest time, I always took the reorder as, all right, cool, they're happy. And sure, I think that that's a pretty good indicator. People aren't going to spend money on things that they're not happy on. However, I want to get a little bit more into the weeds with it, because if we can get just even a couple of points better, that can turn a campaign from a winner, from a loser into a winner.
Yeah, and I think
So,
that you touched on it, which I think is my second point, is understanding what it takes to market, right?
yeah,
And I think we see that sometimes. And if to your point, if you knew what their goal was, hey, our goal is to get 20 cases, evaluate those, and then in another 30 days, we're going to figure out if we want to reinvest in it. It changes how you would market and changes the dollars,
absolutely.
right? So when you put out a lot of media and you don't know where that campaign is going, it then becomes really, really unfortunate as a marketer where I got to say, I got to stop what I've just spent 3 or 4 or 6 weeks building the success and getting my cost down. I have to pause that campaign and start over because I don't know if you're going to continue. And that's the second part of like where understanding how media marketing works is like I place a TV buy. I can't just call them and say, hey, stop that. We're
Mm-mm.
right. They're going to tell me, sorry, I can't do that because that's not how business works. And it's the same difference with law firms. So sometimes I think that's the lost art with them is like understanding where we come from and how media is bought and how it's run to understand where, hey, we've got to give them more transparency in terms of our KPIs, our benchmarks. And maybe it is just like, hey, I always want to see how good you are and see how this stuff backs out. That helps us to plan. And we can say, look, I'm only going to put out a finite amount of media and I get it. Or I'm going to have an account for it and try to find
Yep.
somebody else at that point that might want that same thing. So I think
Yep.
it's a big part. And that's partnership, right?
Yep. I love it. And I love that you said that, because it's, I think a lot of people, even to some marketers in this space, treat it like a light switch. It's not a light switch.
It's
It's not even a car. It's more like a train. And we've all seen a train get going. It takes a while, right? And then
Mhm.
once it's up to speed, guess what? It takes a while to slow down too.
It does.
So it's an interesting conundrum that we find ourselves in all the time. But I like that as well. Like, let's talk about your overall goals. Like, are you looking for 100 cases so you can get on the steering committee? Okay, cool. I want to know what this, what your goals are so that I can
Absolutely.
plan accordingly.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I think
awesome,
it's
awesome. Well, Holden, how's your golf game, bud? Are you gonna play in the Meadow Golf tournament at MTMP?
my golf game is struggling. It's been sparse. So I think for I will be playing golf at some point in at MTMP. But yeah, it's a struggle. We were at the Harris Martin in
Mhm.
Birmingham and got to play the course there, which was nice. With
Awesome.
some other attorneys. And it's just the season's just begun. How
You're
about yourself?
knocking the
How
rust out.
you swinging them? Yeah, exactly.
Awesome, awesome. Last question, and then I'll open up to you if you have anything else that you want to throw out there. Who's a better player, in golf, you or Zach?
Oh, definitely Zach.
Yeah.
But Zach and I finished. We finished with the same score, and it was one of those where he walked off, head held down, and I'm like, "Oh, I played pretty well." So
You've
that
pumped.
always tells you the indicator of like where you are, and it's yeah. But no, Zach, I strive. Zach has got more consistency for sure.
That's awesome. Awesome. Awesome.
Mhm.
Well, Holden, I truly appreciate you being a guest today. You've been a good friend for a long time. I appreciate you coming on the Logic Exchange. Folks out there listening, watching, this is will be on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music. I'm sorry, Apple Podcasts. If you like and subscribe. We're going to keep doing these. Holden, is there anything that you want to end with? Like maybe give folks a good way to get in touch with you. The floor is yours.
Yeah, I mean, you can certainly reach out via LinkedIn or Holden at transportdigitalmedia.com. But I think my parting words is, from fellow marketers is like we all have to kind of maintain the same level of standard and communication with each other, right? And I think law firms do that, right? They all work together and they kind of
Mhm.
chart that path of criteria and certain things. I think we have to start doing more of that. And I love that you and I have that dynamic and some other folks. But I think from a wider perspective, it's great when we can information share amongst ourselves as
Yep.
well, right? I think it
Yep.
makes everybody better, and including what law firms get out of it. So
I completely agree with you, man. I am a firm believer, as you know, that we're all stronger working together. And when the tide rises, all ships rise, right? So
Absolutely.
if we're all working together, rowing the boat the same way, we're doing a good job. And I can sleep well at night with that mentality. So
Love it.
Holden, I appreciate you. Thank you.
Likewise.
Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk again soon.
You as well. Thank you for having
All
me.
right. Appreciate you, buddy. Talk to you soon. Bye bye.